what's the standpoint in terms of Islam on riba? And what does the Quran say on it?
So I see Islamic institutions in a conventional financial system as equivalent of praying in a nightclub. That's how I see it.
That's a good way of putting it.
As in, like, your environment is impermissible. All the regulations given by the banks is impermissible. The whole society is based on interest. So when you try to set up an institution to combat riba, it's very, very hard.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ibrahim is back. Alhamdulillah.
Back with his new and improved nose.
Yes.
Fresh room.
If you have any questions for Ibrahim, please put it on the podcast channel and let us know, and you can answer all the questions. But the short of it is that he can breathe better, but not smell better yet, which is probably a positive thing.
If that's been any horrible ones,
so Bismillah. But today we are going to be talking about something that has been specially requested from a brother I know, a dear brother I know, alhamdulillah, and he told me, and this was already on our list anyway, he told me to talk about riba, interest, and all things related to it, and how we can change the mentality of people with the view in this country or any others, but specifically this country, within our own cultures, within our nationalities, how we can change the view of what is right and what is wrong, and the true view of it. So, Siddhi, do you want to tell us what riba is, and what's the standpoint in terms of Islam on riba?
Riba is actually quite complicated, so I'm just going to focus on the common form of it nowadays, because the technicalities of it really can be confusing unless you've studied it. But in any case, for us, most of the time we experience riba, or interest, in the form that you lend somebody money and you take back more, or you borrow money from somebody and you pay back more. Essentially, that's how we experience riba.
And what does the Quran say on it?
The Holy Quran prohibits it numerous times, and the Holy Quran also mentions that if people don't desist from it,
Allah declares war.
Yes, they are at war with Allah and His Messenger.
And I believe also that's the only place in the Quran where Allah actually declares war.
Oh, really?
The only.
Subhanallah.
In those words, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what. So are we saying, is it the worst thing after shirk? Or is it one of the worst?
One of the worst.
Okay,
it's
fine.
from the kaba'ir, it's from the major sins. The worst thing after shirk is murder.
Okay, fine.
The worst crime after shirk is
makes
kufr and shirk.
It makes sense, yeah.
But it is one of the major sins. It's one of the worst sins.
And that's part of the big issue of riba nowadays, is people don't understand the extent of how bad of a sin it actually is.
Yeah.
And people often complain that obviously we don't have many alternatives. But I see riba. So, for example, Islamic institutions, they're based on, like, they have to operate within the conventional financial system, their regulations and stuff. So I see Islamic institutions in a conventional financial system as equivalent of praying in a nightclub. That's how I see it.
That's a good way of putting it.
As in, like, your environment is impermissible. All the regulations given by the banks is impermissible. The whole society is based on interest. So when you try to set up an institution to combat riba, is very, very hard.
That's a good way of putting it, actually. Is true. I think the issue with riba, and I think let's talk about the main thing that bothers people about riba and what it constitutes, is the mortgage, right?
Usually that tends to be the biggest.
There's other
issue.
aspects of it. We're not
Mortgages,
neglecting. There's
student
others,
loans.
student loans, but also
We already addressed student loans.
Yeah, we're exactly. Mortgage, we touched on it a bit, but let's speak about mortgage. I think the culture has it, and I think some sheikhs are also given this fatwa, that you're allowed to have one mortgage, which has conventional mortgage, which has all these interests to it, in a country such as the UK or a non-Muslim country, which is completely wrong in and of itself. And what's happening is that people, and the brother who told me this, and I've experienced this myself, is that family members are saying, okay, so you want to just pay rent for the rest of your life, or do you not want your own place? Which is true, because if you pay a lot of rent, you could probably pay less for your own house and your own mortgage. But the problem is that mortgage is haram, and they just don't understand that, and families go to war, literally. Like, they will just have fights over this concept of, like, why are you not taking out mortgages? it's better for you, or if they want to,
cheaper.
it's cheaper, but they don't understand that mortgage is a massive form of riba, right?
I mean, ultimately, if they're speaking from an Islamic perspective, then it's got nothing to do with what's better for you or worse for you. We have to come at it from the perspective of Quran and Sunnah, and the correct understanding of Quran and Sunnah. So, people making argument, the worst argument I think I've ever heard, somebody said, renting is worse. I said, why? Said, like, you're paying the money and you're getting nothing from it. Whereas if you get a mortgage, you pay the money, you get an asset, you're wasting your money. Wasting money is haram in Islam.
There we go. Well,
That's one
they
That's
put
probably
a
the
spin
worst
on
one.
that. Yeah.
That's probably the worst one I've come across.
Beautifully articulated.
No. But yes, the point is, if we're going to speak religiously, or in their families people want to speak religiously, then of course it has to be Quran, Sunnah, and the authentic interpretation of it. Whereas people to say, well, everybody does it, or what are you saying, your dad was wrong?
That's the thing.
Was granddad a sinner?
Yeah.
You see, they'll say all kinds. You quote the ayah to them. So are you saying that your brothers are all at war with Allah and His Messenger? You see, they'll make it emotional.
Yeah, okay.
And the point is, we hope not, but that's what the Quran has said.
Yeah.
We can't say anything other than that.
Yeah.
Engaging in riba is a grave, grave sin. It's a great sin. Wa na'udhu billah. So that's the advice for people, is if you're going to discuss it from an Islamic perspective, we need Islamic evidence. And bear in mind what Maulana Saab or Imam Saab does,
Or
is
Beer
not
Saab.
an Beer Saab or Sheikh Saab or Mufti Saab. What they do is not an evidence.
Yeah.
Because that's what people say. They say, look at the Imam, he's got 2 houses. I've heard that. Look at Shaykh Fulan. Well, Shaykh Fulan said it's okay. Fine, no problem. Shaykh Fulan said it's okay. Proof.
Yeah.
Quran and Sunnah and the classical scholars of Islam. But he's a sheikh. Fine. We don't have like a special pass for sheikhs or a badge. I'm a sheikh, I do what I like. Everybody has to abide by Quran and Sunnah.
course, yeah.
And as Sunni Muslims, you have a particular method of understanding what it means. That argument, the one about
The
one house,
Yeah.
tends to be the argument of necessity. Which again, we can't deny that as a concept in Islam. It's a valid concept that in situations of necessity, something which is normally prohibited can be permitted. This is why we have in the Holy Quran itself permission to eat prohibited meat when a person is forced into it. There's no alternative. It's permissible. The Prophet ﷺ famously told Sayyidina Ammar bin Yasir that in situations of necessity, he is permitted to speak words of kufr as long as his heart is firm on Islam. And we have this concept. The concept is sound. It's the application of it.
Yeah.
You see? That's the difficulty with haja or darura, necessity, that, how do you apply it? And that's the important point here. Because otherwise you could say anything's a necessity. Say, I can't pray 5 times a day because, it's necessary for me to work. And, I remember once I came across a person, he said, I'm just going to shake hands with women. I said, well, it's haram. He said, I know it's haram. I accept it's haram. But if I don't do it, then it's just going to be on my mind. It's going to make me uncomfortable. So that's a necessity now as well. So you have to, obviously, the concept exists, it's sound, but it doesn't really make sense in this context. It'd be a strong argument if we had the following. If your options were take a mortgage, or you and your family are homeless, you can make a strong argument for necessity. Because yes, having a roof over your head is a necessity.
But even then, you could just rent a place.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
If renting was not an option.
Oh, right. Okay.
You see, if your choices were street or mortgage, you see, then I'm not saying you should still take a mortgage. What I would say in that situation, consider moving.
Oh, like abroad.
Abroad or elsewhere in the same country. The point is, you don't rush to these things. When you say something is haram and then permissible due to necessity, you have to look at all of the other reasonable options. Now, but that would be a strong argument that I'm going to be on the street, I'm going to take a mortgage. Say, okay, yes, it is a necessity to have a roof over your head. It's not a necessity to own that roof over your head.
Yeah.
You see, and that's where this particular approach falls short because they say, yeah, but you need a house, it's a necessity. We'll say, yes, everybody agrees having a home, a house, a roof over your head is a necessity, but you have the option of renting. As long as that option is in place, then we can't say it's a necessity. And certainly not broadly speaking. If you had a very particular circumstance, this person says, I've tried renting, I've got bad credit history, whatever the issue may be, so I can't rent, I'm going to take a mortgage. First thing we're going to say,
you're probably not going to get a mortgage.
But the point is, at least we can see where he's coming from. He's tried to rent, he can't.
Yeah, you're saying if that's... What about the fact of Islamic mortgage? Number one, there is some Islamic mortgages out there. Fires is especially subject.
And they're like fixed fees on them stuff as well. Like you have like a monthly fee that you give them stuff. I'm not sure.
On Islamic mortgage, yeah. I am somewhat familiar with Islamic mortgage because I have one.
So with the Islamic mortgages.
Excuse me, Fires.
Yeah, sorry,
I'm the one with an Islamic mortgage. Joking. You've got you're doing the Islamic. What were you doing? Islamic finance. Alhamdulillah. Go on.
No, this is just. So I speak to a lot of people about Islamic mortgages. Whenever I bring up Islamic finance with someone, the first thing they always talk to me about is mortgages, and the thing they say is, well, Islamic mortgages are more expensive. Yeah, renting is more expensive. Yeah, and I tell them that like, if it's for the sake of your deen, like surely you paid that cost. Yeah. My point is
it's an option though, isn't it? Because first they're like, oh, but you can't. There's no way of having a mortgage. Well, there you go. There's a way of having a mortgage.
Oh no, it's too expensive.
It's too expensive.
Yeah. And then I provided another alternative. For example, companies like Wayhome, where it's a completely different business model, where you join a joint partnership with that company. They buy the house. You pay monthly, and slowly you take ownership of that house. Yeah. So there's no mortgage, and you tell them that, you're like, oh well, that's even more expensive, and
they're like, oh, but it's not my property. Because
so that's my point, is that the vast majority of people, even people that I deemed as quite religious, they don't want to like take that step or that leap for that sake of avoiding that sin.
And to be honest, it's not I understand the issue of taking that leap because it's quite a lot of pressure. And there's quite a lot of difficulty, and it's paying at times, let's be realistic about this. You're paying £300-400 a month more on Islamic mortgages. Unfortunately, that's how it is because there's some players out there that are monopolising that industry.
This is a problem I have with Islamic mortgages. It doesn't make them haram necessarily.
But ethically, they're not.
They need to explain why. You see, because on the face of it, it doesn't make sense. Because it seems what we're being told is we're changing the contract. So therefore it will be halal instead of haram, which it can be. And I will say this, the fundamentals of any model I've seen are sound. The basic principle.
I've read into it as well.
Halal.
It is.
It's just when you go into the details of the contract, that's where you have problems. But the point is, they need to be really clear and open and loud and transparent about why they're charging more. Because otherwise it doesn't, even though it won't make it haram necessarily, it does seem exploitative.
That's what I'm saying. Do you know why they might be charging more? Right. Is it?
It's the Islamic mortgage.
He just took out a mortgage yesterday. Now he's
cough it out. Are you sure you're okay?
Yeah.
All right. We won't cut it out. We won't cut this bit out. But do you know why they charge a bit more? I don't know.
So the way that these contracts
don't make anything up, man. If you don't know, just say don't know.
That's what I'm going to say is they're very ambiguous. So sometimes not very clear about. So adding on to what Siddhi said was that I personally believe that even sometimes that they exploit on people they know are willing to pay that extra because it's Islamic.
That's so true.
Usually it's to cover the cost of like interest, but I don't know too much. Islamic mortgages to me, first of all, is not like my area of Islam finance. I find it very confusing because, as I mentioned earlier, trying to build an Islamic product within a conventional system is very hard. So the people who are making these Islamic products, there's a very big gap between the consumer and these institutions. There's a huge learning curve to understand how they operate, why they're doing so, and it's very much close to other people joining in that market because the people at these institutions were actually initially set up with the interest of non-Muslim stakeholders. So a lot of these providers actually started the industry because other people joined the Islamic market,
Yeah.
and a lot of people saw it as a way to diversify their portfolios, or a lot of way to make profit. And I'm not saying all institutions, but that's why since the start it's been a bit shaky, because they've had the wrong incentives.
Yeah,
in
and
mind.
it must be. You're going into a business. It must be to make some kind
Exactly,
of money back,
and-
right? You're not gonna.
There's no
I don't
issue
think
with them
that-
making money.
Yeah.
The issue
It's
is obviously it needs to be
exploitation,
in a halal manner.
Yeah.
And secondly, look, don't take advantage of people's taqwa of
Yeah.
Allah subhanahu
And I
wa
think
ta'ala.
that's the issue I have, Siddi. I feel like the
Make
way
a
it is-
profit, make a reasonable profit. Why does it
Yeah.
have to be twice the
Yeah,
average
yeah.
profit? Why does it have to
It's
be that
ridiculous.
far?
Some of it is,
Especially for
yeah.
something as fundamental as a house.
And you know the bit that we'll touch on this next point, which is important, because the second half of the discussion I want to talk about how to challenge family members
Yeah.
in a right way regarding these issues, because as I said earlier, these kind of things are big on like family discussions, and it's really hard to explain it to, say, an elderly person who might be your dad, mum, or even someone, your brother or sister. It's really hard to explain, and I've had these conversations myself, and it's just really hard. And how do you do it?
Part of the advice, obviously, always be respectful. That's
Yeah.
incredibly important.
Yeah.
Don't call people jahil. Don't
Yeah,
call them
yeah.
ignorant.
Yeah.
Don't raise, especially with your parents. Don't raise your voice. Be
Yeah.
very respectful, but also stick to the methodology. Don't try to go down the route of, oh well, rationally this makes sense in this way, or doesn't make sense in this way. You're going to go down a rabbit hole. They'll say, okay, explain to me how that makes sense, how this makes sense, and you're trying to rationalize everything. It's got nothing to do with that. The simple reality is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited it.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point you made this, Siddi. I think the thing we fall into, and we've always done it, when we try to explain something, we try to rationalise it too much. We try to get into the technicalities of it.
Yeah.
But it says it in the Quran.
It's
Mortgage
just
is a form of
yeah.
mortgage is a form of riba, and in the Quran it says Allah will wage war against someone who.
As simple as that. Sometimes religious discussions, we overcomplicate them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But explain it to me. How does that make
'Cause
sense?
it's fun.
No. I'm conveying to you what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says.
There's a funny story, Siddi.
How much time have we got?
Fires is laughing before I said
It's
it.
not a dad joke, is it?
Oh,
It's
it's
not a
a-
dad joke.
No, it can't be a dad joke, man. Let me just say my story. I'm not saying my story now.
No, go on, man.
You've been
go on.
deprived of a funny story, Ibrahim.
Uncle joke.
Okay, fine, it can be an uncle joke.
Yeah.
See, that's the kind
That was
of...
a dad joke in itself. Go on.
So what was someone was trying to justify to a non-Muslim, and it was a funny conversation. They were trying to justify why eating pig is haram, and they were some of the things they said. Oh yeah, they started off like, it's pork is prohibited
Yeah.
because pigs are filthy animals. They basically roll around in the mud. I was like, okay, fine, this guy's got a point. Then they're like, but why? You can just clean them, blah, 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 yeah? They're like, fair enough. Then they're like, oh, no, it's because they got these weird tusks and, they look different. Like, okay, then they went continuing on, and they ended up with the final thing. They said, oh, it's because pigs have curly tails. You're thinking to yourself, you started off with something like a valid point.
Yeah.
And then they were, oh, the way pigs look at you, and all these kind of things. And then I was thinking to myself, okay, this escalated fast.
Yeah.
Basically, the point is, don't justify it. I've tried it myself as well.
Look, when you've got evidence from Quran and Sunnah, Bismillah.
Yeah.
Why is this haram? Well, alcohol. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us some explanation. You can convey that.
Yeah.
Okay. With regards to alcohol and gambling, there's some good in them, but the evil of them outweighs the good. You can say those kind of things, but we should maybe do an entire session on this discussion, because especially amongst people on social media, this is rife. They always, the wisdom for this is this, and the reason this is haram is this, and the reason this is obligatory is this. They like to explain everything. The fundamental issue is, unless you tell people this is my personal understanding, you come across as speaking on behalf of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And you cannot give an explanation of why something is halal or haram.
And without evidence.
Without evidence.
Yeah.
No. So the point is, ultimately, all we can say, unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us some detail, all we can say is, it's haram because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said so. It's fard because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said so.
Yeah.
And that's our approach to deen anyway. سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا غُفْرَانَكَ وَإِلَيْكَ الْمَصِيرُ. We hear and we obey.
And there's obviously incomprehensible wisdom behind what
Yeah.
God's
There's
prohibited.
something
and-
you're not
Wisdom
gonna
in
know.
everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's some things
Yeah.
that we,
Yeah.
in our
Yeah.
limited knowledge,
Yeah.
will just not know.
This is not a denial of wisdom in everything Allah
Mm.
subhanahu wa ta'ala says. This is a prohibition on speaking on behalf
Yeah.
of Allah subhanahu
Yeah.
wa ta'ala without evidence. Somebody says to me, is there wisdom in not eating pork? I say, of course there is, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the
Yeah.
all-wise, said
Yeah.
don't do it. What is the wisdom? I don't know.
You're gonna get fat or something like that.
Yeah, but I don't know, do
Yeah.
I? What's the wisdom in fasting in Ramadan? There I'll say, I can tell you something.
Yeah.
لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ.
Taqoon. Yeah.
So, because there Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that it's been prescribed upon you like it was prescribed upon those before you, so that you may attain taqwa. So
Yeah.
I can say part of the wisdom is this, because I'm not making this up now. This is not
Yeah.
my idea. This is not
What-
coming from me. It's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
What is something like a concept of fasting, or say even mortgage? Like they look at it and say, oh, if you take interest, blah blah blah, and there's financial actual evidence that says, interest is bad because you're accumulating difficulty and you're paying more, blah blah blah. And then the thing about fasting, the scientific evidence now that says actually fasting is good for you, blah blah blah. Can you say that actually the main thing is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said this or said not to do this, but then can you say that there is evidence to also suggest that, look,
Yeah.
it's line in line, it's hand in
There are
hand.
two things I will say about
Yeah.
this. Firstly, with Muslims, you can go down that route, but it's better not to. Because what we're trying to do with Muslims is help them to better submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we go down all of these explanations and this is why, and look at this study and this study, in a way, we are misleading them. Because where we want to take them is, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said do it. You believe
Yeah.
in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There you go. You see? I'm not saying it's haram or wrong absolutely to do it, but for non-Muslims it makes a lot more sense. This person doesn't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doesn't believe in Quran, so you might have to try to rationalize it.
Yeah.
But in both cases, where you're speaking to a Muslim or non-Muslim and you're giving these kind of explanations, what you have to do is just explain that this is my understanding.
Okay, fine.
This is my presentation.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Islam says this. I'm saying, look, Islam says you should fast
Yeah.
29 or 30 days a year, minimum. There's a recent study that says this. That's interesting to me, you see, because that helps me to you're speaking from your own perspective. That's fine. You can do that kind of thing. Whereas when you take that leap, this is why it's haram in Islam. Who decides what's haram in Islam? Who decides why is it haram? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
Don't speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without knowledge. But the short answer to this entire point is, be respectful when you're speaking to family.
Yeah.
And don't go down the rabbit hole of trying to rationalize everything. Keep it simple. Our deen is simple, alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it's not allowed. I don't care what this or that Maulvi says. Okay, this.
I heard
Maulana
that. I
says-
heard that word a long time.
Yeah.
Where did Molby come from?
It's subcontinent. We
Oh.
imported it.
Everything from the subcontinent.
I heard that for a long time.
Yeah.
So that's it. Fine, if all scholars are united on something,
Yeah.
then we might say, hold on, you've misunderstood this verse of Quran.
Yeah.
Whereas you've got plenty of scholars who are saying, no, this is all completely
Yeah,
haram,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
riba. And we're going to say, look, the Quran is clear, the Hadith is clear, the books of fiqh, Islamic law are clear. There are plenty of contemporary scholars who are telling you this is completely wrong. On what basis can you do it? Maulana does it. Doesn't matter what he does.
Maulana's minted. He's got the money. He doesn't even need a mortgage. But what I would say is actually, people that are having conversations with I'm speaking from experience here, be persistent. Don't give up. Don't cave in. Because you know what happens when you show that actually you're willing to stick up, not stick up, but you're willing to fight for something that is haram because you believe it's haram and you want to, go the right way. That actually makes you stronger. It's hard initially when you raise it with people who just haven't heard of it. It's like an alien concept because people have grown up taking mortgages, and this applies to anything, right? Whatever we say, even if you're marrying someone out of your own culture or whatever it be, just stick to it as long as you're doing nothing haram, number one, and you're approaching it the right way. Because ultimately there will be difficulty because it's very hard to change the mind of someone that truly doesn't understand. Now, there could be two things where they just generally don't understand or they're being ignorant and, they need a bit more knowledge. But just stick at it and inshallah, ultimately, no matter what difficulties face, you're doing it for the sake of Allah. like what other better way of, you know, fighting for something, you know, because I know some people that fight for haram, like it's the be it on, you know, they'd be like, and then it's like, come on, but this is something that, you know,
It's great.
it's great.
Yeah. You won't die if you have to rent your entire life.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. You know what? If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. Like, what are you taking your property to your grave?
I'm
Or,
gonna
you know,
take
what, you're not going to take anything with you.
I'm
So-
going to be 43 soon. I've been renting my entire adult life.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
And one of the basic principles in Islam is that all ownership is to Allah.
Yeah.
Right, so even if you own a house, you don't really
What's the
own your
difference?
house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether your name's on the deeds or not, what's the
Yeah.
difference?
No,
As
there's
long
no.
as it's
Ultimately, there's no difference because I don't know if you've got, if Allah has blessed you with roof over your head, and you're paying a monthly amount, all the same. Alhamdulillah, you know, you've got a name. Sometimes having names on properties causes more issues. It causes more issues, like, you know, the split of it and all these kind of things. And we know back home, you know, I don't know if Pakistan is as brutal as Bangladesh, but in Bangladesh, the issues with lands. Subhanallah, like, you know, the three brothers' names on it. You know, a fourth brother hasn't been included because the brother, you know, and it's just fights and death and
some people even get killed over
that's it's just, you know, and
even to the point where some people, like, I've heard that they even wait for their parents on their deathbed to pass away so they can inherit. It's actually crazy how
and
much
that's disgusting. And this kind of thing is greed. It's greed, and it's just it's not. And so
ultimately, look, if you can own a house in a halal manner,
alhamdulillah,
but don't believe it to be the central concern of your life. The most, if I own my own house, I'll be comfortable and happy. No, you won't.
No, there's so much troubles with that as well. Owning a mortgage, you know, there's so much trouble.
So many issues, and the point is, ultimately, as far as Muslims are concerned, happiness is based upon your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you have a strong relationship there, you could have no wealth whatsoever, you'll be the happiest of people.
Subhanallah.
You have all of the wealth in the world, you have nothing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your soul will not be happy, which is your essence. Your soul will not be pleased. You can have fleeting happiness, it will disappear.
Subhanallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to attain true happiness. And that is one that is actually one of where we are devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we feel that connection. What's the word for it? Is it ihsan or where
it sounds like excellence or something.
Yes, spiritual excellence. Can we use that in this term, Siddhi?
To have ihsan with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning to be firmly, completely devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can. But also, al-qurbu ila Allah, yani closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Al-qurbu ila Allah.
Taqarrub ila Allah, closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to attain that. And I think, is there anything else that we want to talk about, guys?
I want to say...
here we go. You're always trying to get...
He's a dictionary.
No, he's always trying to get the last word. Not today.
You get the intro, let someone else get the outro.
Alright.
I think
You can't have it all. You can. I've had it all for 39 episodes. What's the change suddenly? I see how it is. Mutiny. Coop.
Sadia's not here to tell you off on my behalf.
Oh, subhanallah. Go on.
Yeah, no, I think that there are two things that every Muslim can work on to help us move to a riba-free society. One, I think that the practitioners of Islamic finance, you see what they usually do is they transition from conventional finance to Islamic finance, and they bring their knowledge of conventional finance and simply try and put like a Sharia wrapper around conventional finance. So I believe what we need more people versed in finance and versed in the Sharia.
So you're not saying not to get that conventional finance into Islamic finance?
I say don't bring what we have conventional finance and just simply try and alter that to make it Sharia. We should. A lot of organisations actually out there where there's a system, riba-free system for the whole world.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not just for Sharia. It's something that we need to innovate in terms of like financial products that better reflect Sharia and what Sharia truly stands for than just simply getting a conventional product and just trying to see how we can make that Sharia. And number two, I think people need to make a lot more noise about this issue until we pressure the Islamic governments, even our own government, to even things like student loans. There's
Yeah, we didn't even touch on
even
student loans,
Muslims.
yeah.
And what kind of non-Muslim would like a student loan as well? They
Yeah,
might have
no one
interest.
would, eh?
Exactly. So it's clear that these products aren't good for anyone. You know,
Yeah.
Sharia doesn't have to be just for, you know.
It's true, you know,
yeah.
Al Ryan, most of the Al Ryan is one of the Islamic finance.
Yeah.
Most of the, well, not most, but a lot of their clients are non-Muslim.
Exactly. And you know,
Yeah.
one thing I've noticed is that there are actually a lot of Sharia compliant institutions now within the UK that offer like financing solutions.
Yeah,
and housing
so
properties,
many. Yeah,
but they don't market themselves as Sharia.
no,
It's
yeah.
because they believe that if you put Sharia, then it will just
Yeah,
minimize your customer
Yeah.
base to only Muslims. So one of the strongest principles of Islamic finance is make products good, like safe Sharia products that can accommodate for everyone. Because at the end of the day, any good financial system is good for everyone. It's not
Yeah.
good just only for Muslims, right? So yeah, people need to make a lot more fuss, a lot more pressure to our governments, Islamic governments, to shift to a riba-free system,
Yeah.
a more viable one, and not conforming to one that we have now.
your time's up, bro. Time's up. You need.
Yeah,
No, but they're actually two very good points, Fires. I don't know why you didn't raise them earlier.
I wanted to end on them. I wanted to end on them.
This is what I'm thinking to be. He's kept the gems for last. But Alhamdulillah, I'll let you have this one, Fires. Inshallah, no, very good points, mashallah. And that's, inshallah, may Allah allow more of us to get,
Yeah,
I think, gain more knowledge as well, to
Yeah,
understand truly what interest means and
exactly.
what, because then you can make more rational judgments, because there's no benefit to go down the interest route. Whatever you take up an interest, or it's going interest.
Yeah,
Alhamdulillah, there's so many good non-Muslim things like Klarna and things like that,
Yeah.
allowing you to pay for things interest free. You can't, if you can't pay for something straight up, they give you 3 months interest free. PayPal do it interest free. Well, you can buy things that are more expensive and pay for it, alhamdulillah, without actually incurring interest. So
but there are a lot of resources out there to learn. You have Islamic Finance Guru, you have Practical Islamic Finance, you have Riba Free Foundation. All three very good institutes that are really trying to tackle this.
Can we put some?
Yeah, I'll put the links.
Put the links up.
Yeah, and they have tons of resources breaking down very simply what is riba, what can
Yeah.
we do to help, how can
Yeah.
you like help your personal finance to avoid, get more
Yeah.
barakah in your wealth. And there's a lot more resources out there. I think people need to venture out and try and actually take benefit from these.
No, alhamdulillah. Inshallah, I think yeah. Go on, Ibrahim, I'm going to let you do the outro because you barely even said anything.
I said loads of things. Did
Did you? Oh, it must have gone through one year and come out of another.
That's nice.
He responded to you on
Check
Salam at the start.
Okay.
I don't end it.
He's been away 2 weeks, he doesn't know. Well, what are we? Salam. Salam. What's our name? I don't know.
I'm not confident at the end. My bit is like, subscribe, and share.
That's
my
the bit I was talking about. Because you ain't been around. We ain't getting no likes. We ain't getting no
yeah.
subscribes. We ain't getting no shares.
Tell them, man. Tell them.
So let's just stop from the beginning.
Okay.
So let's not forget to like, subscribe, and share. And assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.